filmmakers, Avi Lewis, Naomi Klein, of course, author of This Changes Everything. This whole climate change aspect of and the connection with capitalism, you start off, we heard that clip earlier, and you start your book too by saying you hadn't really gone there before. This was sort of something you were almost in denial about yourself for a long time. How was that?
Well, this project starts from the premise that we're all climate change deniers to one degree or another, just to get through the day. We hear these ever more alarming warnings from the scientific community telling us that we need to be on a radically different road. And yet everything in our culture is telling us the opposite. Just stay on it, go faster, buy more. And that creates such a sense of cognitive dissonance that we have to look away. So Avi starts the film with these, amazing kind of images of just people going through their busy lives, sort of in this state of not knowing about climate change, but actively looking away from it because it is just too overwhelming, and this sort of wave engulfs us. And so we wanted to start, both the book and the film, where so many of us are at, which is just saying, I can't bear to read that news story, not this morning, not with everything else on my plate, And so when I say we're all climate change deniers, I don't mean we're all, the Tea Party and saying, oh, it's cold outside, therefore this isn't happening, but more that we are all in that state of, I just can't go there.
Being a bit ostrichy. You also, I just want to quickly ask about an aspect of that disconnect from the climate change movement, because you called it a bit of a boys' club. You've said that you told The Guardian, climate change debate is a bit of a boys' club. It makes women feel they're not qualified to talk about it. Tell me about what you mean by that.
I often think that, like, on my tombstone, it'll say she was mansplained to death. On a bad day.
Naomi's had a rough time on blogs recently.
No, but I there are so many amazing women involved in the climate movement and really leading the grassroots movement, the movement that you see in the film. I mean, one of the things that I love about the film that Avi's made is that, without beating people over the head, you see that women are at the forefront of this movement, particularly young women, Indigenous women, many of them, young mothers, who are taking action, because they feel this tremendous sense of responsibility to protect the land, to protect water. But when it comes to like the sort of blogosphere, the Twitter sphere, it is very, very male. And I think a lot of it has to do with just these layers and layers of jargon when it comes to climate change. You've got the scientific jargon, then you've got the policy jargon of feed in tariffs and cap and trade. And, most people don't actually know what any of it means. And then you've got the UN jargon, the IPCCs and the, UNFCCCs, and people just go like, okay, I just can't go there, right?
I'm out.
Well, and the film, I mean, kudos to you, Avi, because the film does put, and as you say, Naomi, not in a heavy-handed way, but the real stories, the human faces, the very clear, mothers, real people engaging in these issues, going way beyond the acronyms. I'm curious how you chose to, or how did you even begin to start distilling a 500-page book,
right.
Written by your wife. Right. So you got to be careful on that front too. Yep. What was your approach to telling the story?
This has been a 5-year journey for us, and the book and film were produced simultaneously. So there was no 500-page book to work from. In fact, I was already at fine cut in the documentary before Naomi had a full draft of the book. So what it was an idea. Naomi's fundamental idea that the roots of the climate crisis are to be found in an economic system gone wild, and that the system produces inequality and injustice and also climate change through this rampant consumption of finite natural resources. And so that's actually a really hopeful revelation, that the roots of this existential crisis for humanity are in the economic system, because everybody knows that this economic system needs to change. And so the challenge from a filmmaking point of view is that, I was a little allergic to talking heads documentaries and docs that just make an argument or kind of an essay. I think the power of film, the power of documentary to transform people's sense of what's possible is by seeing change happening, by seeing human beings in intense situations and seeing what human beings are capable of and having that emotional connection. So we had to, I spent a couple of years scouring the world for places where these ideas were playing out in people's real lives. And the film ended up being a portrait of movements and communities around the world. We shot in 8 different countries. We shot on 5 different continents. We went to India. We went to China. And what you see is a portrait of communities and movements who are on the front lines of either climate catastrophe or, more frequently, fossil fuel extraction, and how communities are responding not just to the threat to their land and their water and their way of life, but creating a more just and a healthier community as a result of their struggle.
I want to pick up on what you talk about movements, because you focus on some of the more familiar movements that people will know of and have heard, and that they see in the film. Idle No More, the Occupy movement. Those have, in large measure, sort of fizzled out, certainly from the public consciousness after that initial groundswell of support. Do you think that you're overestimating the significance of these movements, these social groundswells?
I think there's a fundamental mistake between the way that we can access stories of social movements through media. Most as a media maker myself, and you know this too, most media folks don't understand the first thing about social movements. And we have very cliched ways of telling those stories. What exploded in Occupy and in Idle No More were ideas. And those ideas caught like wildfire. And those ideas have only grown in the time since. A demonstration, for instance, is literally a demonstration of a movement's power to mobilize people in a moment. But the power of those ideas, and Occupy, the idea that inequality is a serious social crisis that trumps most of our other concerns, that idea is now commonplace. Occupy brought that to us. That idea hasn't stopped affecting our discourse. And the idea of Idle No More, that First Nations land rights could be our last best hope to save the earth and the water and the atmosphere and human life, is an intoxicating idea that hasn't done anything but grow since Idle No More splashed onto the scene. So it's the power of those ideas and their ability to transform what is possible that we want to explore.
But this is also a challenge to all of these different movements to say we need to work together, and we have to get out of these sort of single issue silos and build a much more sustained, broad-based movement that isn't just about demonstrations, that is about the courts, that's about the political process, but you know, since the book came out in September, and I've spent the past 4 months in rooms filled with people talking about climate change, so I feel like I'm in touch with what is, how people feel about this issue, to the extent that anyone can be. I'm talking about this all the time with people directly. And, what that experience has really left me with is we know how big the problem is. In fact, we're overwhelmed by the size of the problem. The real stumbling block is the feeling that we can't change, that it's too big. And that's the exciting part.
But we haven't. I mean, we've known about, to whatever degree, we've known about climate change, and we've tried to change policy. We've set caps and failed to meet, and limits and failed to meet them for years. Emissions keep going up. Do you have any concern that you are presenting a false hope in the hopefulness of your film?
Well, our mantra in this process is credible hope, because I do think that there is often a false hope presented where it's just presented as sort of a technological challenge, right? Or just a policy challenge. We just need to put the right policies in place, get the right market incentives. We have to need a breakthrough in solar technology and battery storage, and we'll be there. And in fact, we are not downplaying the scale of this challenge. We're saying we need to change everything. The project is called This Changes Everything. So I don't think anybody can accuse us of sort of underplaying the scale of change. What we are saying is that's actually good news, because this economic system is failing the vast majority of people on Earth with or without climate change. So it's not as if this system is working perfectly except for the small matter of rising sea levels. There are vast problems like joblessness, huge inequality, violence, war. We need to change. And this is our wake-up call.
Avi, I'm curious about why you didn't introduce any of those voices, those skeptics saying, look, we can't do this on renewable energy. Not the deniers, but the sort of pragmatists who say, yeah, okay, we get that we need to change, but this isn't the solution. Why didn't you want to present any opposing views in your?
There are opposing views. There are CEOs.
You see some clips of Joe Oliver.
There are politicians, but there are in the various storylines in Greece, in India, in China. There are voices that are much more from the status quo. I hosted a debate show on News World for years, and a lot of my work in journalism has been about debates and about the idea that presenting radically different visions of the world in their most passionately articulated forms serves democracy. So I'm very familiar with that kind of journalism. This is a kind of storytelling which is different. This is a kind of storytelling which is trying to take the viewer through that glass barrier of that sense that we can't change anything, that the machine is going to keep grinding on, that we know is leading us down a suicidal path as a species, and actually look at how change happens on the personal level, on the community level, and hope that people will be inspired to see that extrapolated to the societal level. And so it wasn't a policy debate. And I think this gets to the core of what books do really well and what films do really well. Because, debatey type talk shows, I love. I'm addicted. I've hosted them. Awesome. Debatey type talking heads documentaries, I think it's a waste of the form. I mean, I've seen some really good ones, and I do enjoy them, but it wasn't the opportunity that this project afforded.
You guys, in the middle of all of this, just shifting it to the personal here before we let you go, you had a baby. Tell me about that.
Oh,
yeah,
she's right.
I wanted to point that out. No, I'm curious about how that colored your thinking about what kind of future you're bringing a child into.
It's funny. We've had some debates about this because it obviously does. It changes everything. But
you dedicate the book to your son.
Yeah, and I think for Naomi writes beautifully about the experience of becoming a mother and the process of grappling with these existential issues. I personally resist the idea that we're doing it for our children because I think it's I just find those cliches disempowering in a weird way. I think the urgency of the situation is one that confronts all of us, and that the notion of putting it off to future generations or having a responsibility to abstract ideas like the world's children actually puts us backwards. But from a personal point of view, I mean, Naomi has explored this.
It did mean we took him to the tar sands when he was 1, and he really, I think that was a big problem because he's obsessed with trucks.
However, the truck obsession preceded that trip.
I was going to say, that one might have been hard to avoid, the truck obsession. Thank you guys both so much for being here.